Good evening, everybody. Welcome to, this is the third meeting of the Scrutiny Committee, and the other committees haven't even got started yet. I come to warn you that there is no proposed fire alarm this evening, so if you do hear it, use the exits there or here and assemble in the park. There it is. Thank you. This meeting is being webcast live on the internet, and please, for all members, including the chairman, ensure their mobile phones are switched off. So have we any apologies for absence for this meeting? Councillor Harvey.
Here we are. Start off as we've been to go on. Councillor Gavin James is going to be late attending the meeting. I was contacted this afternoon, said he's attending a school event in Guildford and will be here as soon as possible, but he's representing his ward and his school in Guildford and will attend late to the committee.
Thank you. Are there any reserves sitting in tonight? Substitutions, as we used to call it? Right. Are there any declarations of interest on the matters on the agenda tonight? Yeah. We have no urgent matters, I believe. We now have the minutes of the 17th of June. Has everybody had sight of those? Mm-hmm. Any comments on the accuracy of those minutes? No. Thank you. Those minutes are adopted. And now we have invited Councillor Raffel, the Cabinet Member for Planning, to come and speak to us.
Chairman, thank you for inviting me to Scrutiny. Unknown to any of you, I knew I was going to be here a long time ago. Indeed, I knew I was going to be here from the moment that it looked like Scrutiny was going to be reformed. I became aware around about this time last year that the performance indicators for planning and development control. Well, they can hear me. If it doesn't work, I might as well just crack on. Don't you agree?
Well, I think.
Yes,
you're not then appearing on the webcast.
Well, that doesn't matter. I'm sure nobody wants to see me. If they want to hear me, they can hear me.
Do carry on.
I became aware that the performance indicators were not being met, and I had a number of other concerns to do with customer relations, which I've been waiting for the right opportunity to broach with officers. So I started a series of meetings with senior officers and Tracy here and with Mike Townsend to work out what was causing the problems in the performance indicators and also to get to grips with perceived customer relations issues. To put things into perspective, in July to September of last year, on major applications, the performance was about 33% being completed within the agreed period when the target is 70%. On minor, 45% when the target was 75%. And on others, it was 70% when the target was 90%. And I was concerned that this appeared to be a picture that wasn't improving rapidly. It wasn't, as it were, a blip. I can tell you now that for the period April to June of this year, with the target of 70% for major, we are 88%, so we're exceeding it. For the target for minor applications of 75%, we're 83%, so we're exceeding it. And for other applications with a target 90%, we're at 87.97%, so just below. So things have been turned around, but it's a position that I want to keep an eye on. the reasons behind the poor performance appeared to be, first, that a new computer system had been introduced that created a backlog, and that backlog had to be dealt with. Second, there were a number of major applications which caused a lot of staff time to be dedicated to them, which meant that, as it were, the backlog didn't get cleared in relation to the minor applications or the simpler applications. So just to remind you of what they were: Razors Farm, Kennel Farm, Worthing Farm, Overston Hill, Blossford Lane, Caesars Way. There was public inquiries in relation to 2 of those. 3 more are subject to appeals. And then, of course, there have been the 2 wind turbine applications, which one in particular has had to have cooperation with 2 other local authorities. So, there have been other developments such as Network Rail and Waitrose John Lewis, which have taken a lot of time. I was concerned also that even though these might, as it were, be explanations, that there may, as it were, be a management issue. Now, obviously, I'm not an expert in management of officers, but I wanted to make sure that in terms of casework, that there was, as it were, accountability and someone was making things happen rather than just waiting to see if they'd happened. And in other words, proactive case management. And perhaps I'll move on to what we have done. We have implemented a new team structure this year in April, May, which causes the caseworkers to report to the principal planning officers, and we have caseload meetings between officers and their line managers every couple of weeks. There is a greater input from the team leaders on performance management, and we have looked at taking on experts or temporary staff to deal with some of the major applications so that they, as it were, don't cause disruption to the general flow of other applications. And for instance, certainly the wind turbines, but that fell into that category. We have filled various vacancies: a principal planning officer, another planning officer, compliance and enforcement assistant, and a principal compliance and enforcement officer. And we then met in June of this year, following those various changes. And in the background to all that, I should tell you about the customer relations issues. As a ward councillor over the years, I've heard stories, and you always put it down, well, is it the application? Is it just peculiar to the particular circumstances? And none of this ever impinges on the officer's decision making. It impinges on the handling of the case. And I was concerned. So at the beginning of this year, I got chapter and verse from those who'd had made complaints to me, and I took these to senior officers, and we started to look at what the problems were. And I was concerned as to the way that cases were being handled in terms of keeping applicants informed of progress, so that if an applicant rings up, if the caseworker is away for whatever good reason, it's important that the applicant still got an answer, either from someone else who could access the file or from someone else who would pass on the message, so the file would be accessed pretty promptly. I was concerned that deadlines were often not necessarily being seen as something to make sure that work had been completed within them, but as it were, something to remind those who are looking after the cases that things ought to have been done by them. As in, it's more like the alarm bell going off at the end of the time, rather than seeing it as a flashing light in the distance that needs to be avoided. And I was aware that a lot of the problem had been with other partners who are asked to provide reports who just don't provide them in a fast enough fashion. And I wanted to make sure that we came up with a way of dealing with that. So where we are now, obviously we've turned around the performance, but I want to make sure it stays within the indicators, and if not far better than that, is that I have set in place an external independent review of the planning development team to consider all aspects, including resources, structure, performance, recruitment, and processes. And this was all done, as I say, way before your request for me to come here. We've asked, and we're in the process of instructing, a chartered town planner with over 30 years of local authority experience at all levels, including head of paid service, who acts as a consultant to other local authorities, to come in and probably deal with these topics: planning performance statistics, planning appeals statistics and decisions, planning committee information, the numbers and details of applications determined contrary to officer recommendation. In other words, just work out whether the way we do things is very consistent with other authorities or whether it's slightly unusual. Any costs awarded against the council following planning appeals are going to look at that. Complaints concerning the planning service, any other customer feedback, including satisfaction surveys. I just pause there. One of the other things that I've asked to happen is that we conduct for a period of time a customer survey to go out on all decision notices, so that we can, as it were, have objective evidence rather than, as it were, councillor generated evidence, which is where we are at the moment. Because it seemed to me that that might be easier for officers to feed into other officers for improvement if it comes back directly from the customers, not necessarily via the councillors, because they may, for whatever reason, think that we've spun it. I'm not saying I do any spinning, but they may think that we've emphasised things in a particular way, with this look at the way we do things. We'll also look at ombudsman decisions relating to planning matters, the departmental structure, sickness information, analysis of service vacancies, turnover. You appreciate that this particular department, historically, and perhaps it may be the case in other authorities as well, does have a relatively high turnaround of staff because people improve and move on. It's generally easy to recruit and it's easy to lose. It's just one of those things. And we then take it pretty swiftly, really. We would then have some objective evidence to work out where we are, whether we can improve, how we are in relation to other authorities, because without our own individual experience of being on other authorities, which of course may have been different long time ago with different laws, it's very difficult for us to judge, and I hope you feel that might be an appropriate way of looking at things. And of course, I will be speaking with the person concerned about all the issues that I had raised with officers. We will also recruit planning administration posts to allow the officers to focus on determining planning applications, pre-applications and appeals, and to assist with customer queries when case officers are not available. And what I mean by that is it has been fully understood by the officer team that we want the ability that another officer who may not be dealing with the case but can look at the case file to say, I can tell you that they are writing their report this Tuesday. Can you ring back on Wednesday? Not that I'm afraid I can't tell you because they are wherever they are. And that certainly would help with communication. And we're also looking at publishing consultee comments online like other authorities do. There's been issues over data protection. We believe we can get over those issues, but we've just got to deal with the issues. So quite a lot going on. It's all been bubbling below the surface. But as I say, I'm quite happy to come here. I'm also quite happy to come back when we've done the next stage. We can answer questions, perhaps.
Yes, I think questions for the cabinet member, please, from members of the committee. Councillor Keating.
First of all, can I ask you, is the webcast now working? Yeah, I just wanted to know, was it working? It's okay. Thank you for that. First of all, can I welcome your contribution, because it effectively cements into being the peer review approach, which was that cabinet members should be the responsible people rather than the relevant officers, and you're exhibiting that level of responsibility and on occasion culpability, but on this occasion not. No, so I welcome that, because I think the council will be better for it, and the relationship with officers will be improved because of it. The specifics of what you have actually engineered in the development planning department, I don't know enough about what they do to pass judgment on it, but it would appear to be working. The latest statistics show that the performance has much improved, and that's good. The idea of having an admin person who would be able to respond to queries and questions from customers, and dare I say it, even councillors, is a good idea in my view, and I think it should be considered as a potential in other departments, because I know it's unfortunate that on many occasions people get told, sorry, the person that you want is not here, call back next week. And as a councillor, you kind of can live with it sometimes, but as a member of the public, I think it would be much more difficult to live with. I've got two questions really. Arising from my reading of other papers, I see an expenditure addition of 60 grand. Is that for the external review, or is it for the new posts? That's the only question I have for you, and thank you.
It's for the new posts. It's not the external review. Can I also tell you this, that I omitted to say? One of the things that one of the, I think we call him planning manager. What's his name, is it? Greg Chapman. He's the one that sits. Yeah, he sits with them, doesn't he? We've moved. Yeah, we've moved the principal planning officers to be seated quite close to the caseworkers, so they can actually manage and see what's going on. Because then everyone is working together better as a team. And then if you can't get the caseworker, you might get the principal planning officer, who will probably have an idea of what's been going on.
I don't know how to work it, but well, if someone can do that, and but Councillor Regan's the next person to ask a question. Just understanding the Vice Chairman's system. Councillor Kubit, please.
For the rest of the committee, the rest of the committee, I agree with what Councillor Keating refers to when he refers to the peer group, but I do actually think that Councillor Raphael, unlike many of the other portfolio holder has always taken responsibility for his portfolio. So I don't think it's as a result of the peer, but I welcome it because I think it's actually key to the good workings of the council. I also welcome everything that the portfolio holder has announced today. I have been a client, as I'm sure many of the councils have been, not just in referencing our own ward members, but in our own capacity. And you've alluded to a lot of the issues that we've had to deal with up until recently. And good practice in commercial environments is that you have a team leader and you have a team, and there's usually 4 on a desk, and there's ownership of folders that isn't exclusively the ownership of one person. So that's great news. And I just really wanted just to find out from the portfolio holder what the time frame was of the feedback from the consultant that you're going to hire, because I often say to my ward members, you just got to remember that we're only responsible for emptying dustbins, social housing and housing benefit, litter, and planning. That's our main raison d'etre, and quite frankly, a lot of the rest of the stuff, could easily not take place. And so it's one of the most important things we do, and it's really important, and I'm really excited to hear that you're getting a handle of it, because I did request a former leader of the Conservative group 6 years ago to get a handle of it, because there were problems then, and not much happening since. Anyway, so thank you very much. Great news. And when?
We're hoping that the consultation will include, obviously, with you as councillors and other interested people, parish councillors, maybe applicants, developers. We'll just see. We'll design the scoping of that in due course. But we are hoping that they will start in August, and we're hoping that they will start to have a report by the end of September. I have here. When that means we'll come back to you, I don't wish to say at the moment, because I think we would like to see what they say and then put together some proposals if necessary. But clearly, we're very happy to come back here or wherever is appropriate.
Thank you. Councillor Musson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. It was good news indeed to see that the statistics had improved. Sadly, I wasn't aware of that. Not sure how I would get at that information, so be nice to know. And if it's not available to me, could we make it available? Because perhaps a department, knowing that everybody can view their performance, would.
We'll pause for engineering works.
Oh, yes. Well, what we'll do is we'll just check to see if the latest figures are on the website. They're meant to be, and apologies if they're not, but they're meant to be. They're under performance or something.
Can I say, Rob, that as a member of this committee, we'll be seeing those statistics 4 times a year. You've got some attached to this agenda. Unfortunately, there's a time lag in what we see, but this is now the committee that will be reviewing all of those performance statistics, but not at length, because we have a performance panel on which I think there might be a vacancy.
Thank you, Chair. Nice hint there. And the second question, the last question from me, was comparisons with other authorities. I wasn't sure how you would be, or how we would be selecting the relevant authorities, but suffice to say, I think we'd all agree it wouldn't be helpful if we were told, well, you think we're bad, you want to think yourself lucky you aren't in such and such authority. So could we pick the right benchmarks for that, please? Thank you.
Yes, good point. And the consultant has experience of a number of authorities, and I dare say you will be in perfect entitled to put that to him directly.
Councillor Harvey.
I was just thinking in response to that, thank goodness we're not Hart next door with its reputation on planning. Important to point out, I think. Can I just say, I think, thank you for what you've said, and also it's pretty clear you've got a grip of this. I mean, that's blatantly obvious from what you've said, and I think that's really appreciated. I think it's also important just to say that Mike and his team are incredibly competent. They are incredibly good, and from a perspective of what we're looking at improvement. And I think that's, from what you've said, is really where the focus is. I also think that the planning department, as most planning departments do in most councils, suffers from an incredibly high turnover. It seems to be the throughput of people that come in from, doing training, coming into planning, learn the ropes, and then move on to other sectors. So hanging on to staff has been an issue for quite some time, not just your own portfolio years, but before that. So I think the industry is an issue in itself. That then begs the question, I think if you're looking at a review, just a couple of points just to bring up, I think. How our officers analyse applications and then the manner in which they write reports, I think is something worth examining. And I've raised this with Mike before, and I know you yourself have raised it, and other members have raised it. When you get that report in the body of those huge minutes and huge agendas that come through, the question begs, is the report giving us everything it needs to do as a member? Is it giving us all the information we require in the manner in which it makes the arguments either for or against an application? So that also then begs the question of the consultation approach. And I did note what you said there about the exceptional impact of other statutory consultees. And when they do and they don't come back to us, and how they do and they don't come back to us, that's outside of our ability, but at the same time it has a direct impact on that department's performance. And I think that's a really important issue. So the likes of the county and the statutory bodies such as the transport authorities and so on, I'd like to see them give as much credibility to this as we are, because they are just as much a part of it. In terms of the changing of the planning committee, how that operates itself as well, I wouldn't want to see that not considered. The officers do their bit, but the planning committee itself needs to have a good look at itself in terms of, how we've been dealing with these issues, because they are the ones that have sat listening to these major applications. And it was important, I think you made the list of them there, of all the amount of major applications that came through last year. That's not going to be exceptional. So the question begs, if that happens again, is the department able to cope with that level of workload and that intensity on those kinds of sites coming through? And then I guess the other point to finish on is just, if we have this level of turnover, we have all of these issues, then maintaining the quality and the standard in the department is really important. So growing our own and incentivizing us to grow our own inside the planning department, I think, becomes really important, and I'd like to encourage you to give some thought to that, to how we maintain a strong local authority based planning department that really does harness the talent, because we've had plenty of people come through who have done really well with us and then moved on into the private sector, as the industry does, which is great, but it doesn't help us if we're losing them and we're not retaining that talent. So I think it's an important point just to think about going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you for all those good points, and we will take them all on board. I've made a note, and we both have.
Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chairman. Hello, Mike. Councillor Harvey's covered a lot of what I wanted to say, really. I'm currently a member of the DC committee, as you know, and could I just, first of all, like others, put on record that the quality of the work, the reports that we actually receive as a DC committee is exceptional, I think, really. And the sort of person hours that go into them can only be calculated, I think, really. And we've had, it may not be exceptional, but we have had a substantially difficult period over the last couple of years. And as you said yourself, I mean, something like the Bullington Cross wind farm application must have taken an enormous amount of person hours in conjunction with other local authorities. Those things, have to be calculated in amongst all of this. One of the things I did just want to ask, I know Councillor Harvey's raised it, but it just seems to me it's unacceptable oftentimes, even at the stage that we get reports, for some of the other consultees not to have commented, even though there's been a massive period in between. And we often get reports where we're still unable to say that the Water Authority, perhaps even the Transport Offshoot Authority, hasn't commented, even though they've had maximum time to do it. When we seek to make a decision, even with that deficiency of information, now that can't be acceptable, I think, in the context of making what I hope would be a proper objective appraisal and decision about a planning application. Now, I don't know that any penalties exist for that, but it does seem to me for this local authority, in a sense, to be criticised for poor performance sometimes, and perhaps even to be rated in this regard, when oftentimes I fear it's the case that we're waiting on a flow of information that we don't seem to have much control about. I think it's just unacceptable. So anything that your external review can lead to in that regard, I think would be very, very helpful, really. And then all of us will have confidence in the reports that we receive. Not that I haven't got them now. I don't always agree with them, by the way, as you know, but I commend the officers for the quality of those reports. And thank you for the substantial update we've had tonight. I'm impressed greatly by the improved performance. I hadn't anticipated it myself. I hadn't been wise to that in a way, I think, like Councillor Musson is saying, but it's very impressive, and thank you for that.
Chairman, can I thank Councillor Potter for what he said? The issue of statutory consultees and others responding, we are playing with a number of different thoughts at the moment. Do we change the timescales to make them shorter? Do we go in heavy-handed and remind them about the need for them to cooperate? Do we inform them that if they don't respond in a certain time, it will be written as no objection? All of those have are possible solutions, but they may not be perfect ones. And so we're looking at that. One of the things we want to do, obviously, is with this consultant, is discuss that particular issue and see if there is a better way of dealing with it. It is very annoying, and it's one of the things that came out of the complaints that I had received from members of my ward and other councillors, when you have a situation where 8 weeks has gone by and the officer is simply saying, well, we still haven't had a response. There's an onus on two parts in that problem. One is the caseworker and anybody above them to push the thing along and make it happen. And the other is on the statutory consultee to respond. And so we are looking at that, but it has been, as it were, either a cause of some of the backlog, or ultimately just coming about because we hadn't quite got things right because of officers being stretched at the time. And I'm hoping that with both being sorted, getting rid of backlogs and officers focusing on what they do best is getting the show on the road, that we'll manage not to be delayed by these problems in the future, I hope. But we will discuss it.
At the last meeting of the performance panel before the election, discussed these issues, and we found that most of those members have since fled. But we found that a common experience that internal consultees were delay in responding was the cause of delay. In recent months, I've been copying my comments on this to Tracy Cole because it became apparent to those of us at that subcommittee that it's not within the control of the planning development manager and his team if other employees of the council are not responding. Have you any proposals for improving the performance of consultees around the council and making sure they don't delay recommendations on planning applications?
Tracy.
Yes, thank you for that question. I have met with my colleagues, heads of service, who are responsible for the service areas for the consultees to which you refer, and we have agreed a plan of approach which should see some improved performance as we go forward. And indeed, the stats that you've had today do show that there is an improvement in our own internal consultee processes, but we will be monitoring that very, very carefully.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
As I say, that's arisen out of what we've discussed earlier, because we realised that part of the problem was internal and it needed to be dealt with in that way.
Good, thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Just a very quick point to pick up on what's just been said. I think one thing we haven't mentioned yet, and I think would be useful to examine, would be the pre-app process. Mike's done some good work on that so far, on that big strategic body that was set up, the idea of the all-member panel. A couple of applications have been through it, but I think a more formal process that this authority might adopt, where developers, no matter what the size, because it doesn't matter what the size is, it's the fact that our officers are chasing after the fact they're trying to plug the hole that could have been easily dealt with if the pre-app had been got right by the applicant in the first place. then if there's a very effective pre-app process that we can work through, then it gives the applicant the encouragement, I think, to do the right things with the community, let alone our statutory consultees, before we get as far as a submission. And it gives our officers the evidence up front, rather than them chasing it within the 13 weeks, to develop their reports in a much more swift and quicker fashion. So I'd look to having a far more formal encouragement to the pre-app process that applicants are encouraged to go through.
I think we'll consider that as part of our review.
Thank you, Councillor Musson.
Thanks, Chair. Couple of other points. The visibility using the website is actually quite good. I use it all the time and encourage residents to use it quite often as well, because it is quite helpful. The one thing I'm not aware of is if there's any ability to view enforcements. We can, of course, easily view applications, and we can see some of the progress with dates on the website, which I think is very helpful to residents, because it gives them an indication that they can wait until a certain time before they can expect something to happen. But I'm not aware of anything like that with enforcements. As far as I'm aware, we don't have access as members, and neither do the public, as to any database. So if there was anything that could be done about that. What I'm thinking here, to be honest, Mark, is things that will prevent all of the questions that we as members and as the officers are getting in planning, which of course take their time, because as soon as they get a question, they then have to answer it and respond to it. So anything that can give better visibility to members of the public and to us as members will reduce the number of questions we put to the officers and help them to be able to get on with the job. So two things on that, really. The one is enforcements, if there's some way we can have visibility of the progress of those. And the same with the planning application. At the moment we see dates, but of course we haven't got a clue what's happening in between. The only way to find out is to phone and ask. Lastly, you mentioned the targets or the performance measures that we have. I presume that there's escalations, so if a particular application doesn't meet, you mentioned alarm bells going off. If it were possible, again with visibility in mind, to have something written down as to what the escalation process is. It may be that we already have this, but perhaps making it more visible so that members of the public can see it, we can alert them to it. So if we're asked the question, what happens if it doesn't get done on time, we can say to them, well, if you refer to this, you can see that what happens if it doesn't happen within a certain time, it gets escalated here, and then if not within a certain time after that, it gets there. So they can actually feel confident that we have a process, that something will happen if it doesn't go as planned. Just thinking about visibility, I think some of those things would be helpful. Thank you.
Yes, well, we'll definitely take all that on board. Thank you, Chairman.
Are you able to commit to a date when you'll come back and update this committee on these things, Mark? Well, we'll work extremely hard if you can bring that date forward. We do have a meeting in November. Okay, we'll be watching them each quarter.
I will be here, but we can have a discussion as to where we are in September, because it may be that it could be a two-stage process. It could be come back and discuss the report in October, and then come back and in January when we've got some further performance figures.
Well, I'm impressed by the scrutiny work that's already being done there. But do any members disagree that we can liaise with Councillor Raffel in expectation of a report when there's something significant to report on? Content with that? Well, thank you very much for coming along. I was a bit embarrassed to see the Constitution says that we can require your attendance, but we invited you and you came, so thank you very much. Councillor Harvey.
Just before you move on, and considering the way the debate has gone, I will declare a personal interest that I do work in the industry in terms of pre-app and processes and planning. So I will declare that, but I think it's appropriate I do that at this stage.
Now we are going to review the outcome of the meeting with Stagecoach, and we have the cabinet member who was with us at that meeting present now. So I'll invite Councillor Rossington to come forward and sit with us. I have tabled some words that merely, don't hang on a minute, but I'm tabling merely as the sort of thing I might be the outcome, but I don't want to anticipate the discussion that we're going to have reviewing that.
As you all know, I'm partially sighted and I'm still getting paper with small print. I can't read the statement. So someone come up with a large font statement for me, please.
I apologise for that. That's come from me, not from anyone else, and I didn't give the matter any thought. I, of all people, ought to be aware of that, and I apologise. But, as I said, this is really my attempt to set a target for what we do, but I should be open, I think, for all members and the cabinet member to comment on the outcome of that review. Does anybody want to begin that discussion?
Councillor Regan has the disadvantage of not having read what we've read, and it seems to me that would be unfortunate really to start the debate until he has. Could we bear with him for 5 minutes? I mean, it seems to me they'll produce something, won't they?
Fred, I have no idea what technology is available to us. So can we blow up the print? Well, actually, that's quite convenient because the chairman would like a comfort break. So we can.
Vice Chair would like a comfort break, but we're not sharing it.
I'm going to. I think, bearing in mind that I have to take the blame for anything that went wrong with that review, I suggest wait till I get back. Councillor Regan, have you now had a chance to read that?
I have, Chair.
Right. Now, who would like to speak first in the review of the outcome of that meeting? Councillor Keating as one of the movers of the motion which gave rise to the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that I certainly as an individual councillor was slightly surprised at was the view put forward by Stagecoach that they had started talking to the council in October, November time of last year. Certainly as a ward councillor in a ward that is first of all 3 miles from the town centre, a large proportion of electors who are elderly, and a lot of them reliant on buses, some of whom have had to change jobs or lose jobs because of the changes in the buses. For us to then hear in the second week of December about the Stagecoach proposals, I think was disturbing. For us allegedly as a council being told late October, for the ward councillors to hear in the second half of December. So if the liaison committee meetings with Stagecoach are continuing, and I hope they are, then I believe they ought to be more open and perhaps even attended by some additional people, like for instance ward councillors, because it is critical that we don't get to the point anymore that people are asking councillors what's happening with the buses, and councillors are saying, I don't know. And that actually happened on this occasion. I know it happened in my ward because I was one of the people that were asking. And I know it happened in my ward because my colleague who uses the buses all the time also didn't know. So I believe we need to fix that bit so that we're never in that situation again. The reason that the issue was raised at Scrutiny was because if you send it to a policy committee, the policy committee doesn't have any teeth of any kind. They have no teeth of any kind. They have as many teeth as a hen. The reality is a policy committee can comment on a proposed policy. It can ask for those comments to be passed on to the cabinet or the cabinet member, and that's the extent of their power. So I believe this issue should not be passed from Scrutiny to a policy committee, which should not be passed to a policy committee which would be ineffective in terms of operational issues of this nature, and it should remain an issue for scrutiny. Thank you, Chair.
I don't think that's right, Councillor Keating, and they are overview and scrutiny committees. Whenever I refer to them as policy committees, I put policy in quotation marks because I'm old enough to know what a policy committee was, which was a committee that made decisions on policy. But they are overview and scrutiny committees, and the scrutiny procedures in the Constitution apply just as much to those committees as to this one, I believe. I don't know whether the officer would like to comment on that. It's on the constitutional point.
Chairman, the two committees have slightly different terms of reference. The Policy Committee's emphasis is on policy development and forward-looking business, if you like. The Scrutiny Committee is essentially backward-looking at performance and decisions. The fundamental difference apart from that is that the Scrutiny Committee alone has the powers of call-in, which of course wouldn't apply in the case of decisions taken by a third party. But I think fundamentally the committees have the same teeth or lack of them depending on your perspective, actually.
Thank you. Could I ask if Councillor Rossiterton would like to respond to the early part of what Councillor Keating says, the involvement in liaison, I think?
I think this was discussed for over 3.5 hours at your first meeting. Yes, I was not aware that Stagecoach were going to change their buses until I think it was January or so, just before the ward councillors were made aware of it. And as soon as we knew and we had the problems, the ward councillors were brought in, we discussed it with them, and I'll say again, I was not happy with the way it had been handled. I asked Mr. Dyer to come and speak to me, which he did not have to do. They're a commercial company. He came in and he spoke to me and he agreed with me that in future, when anything was happening with the buses to changes to service, then we would call the relevant people in to discuss it. And that would be probably ward councillors, county councillors, the general public that were directly affected by it, and also businesses, anyone who would be affected by it, because it may be, it happens in Hatch Warren, but it's affecting your business in Basingstoke. So you'd have to have the two coming in to talk together. And I have got a good rapport with them. I don't want to lose it. And after the last meeting, I hope that I haven't lost it.
Thank you. Councillor Regan.
I don't know about losing your relationship with Stagecoach. We've lost our buses, so I mean, that's the whole issue. So, after 3.5 hours of debate last week, I think it's finally at the end that Mr. Dyer conceded that maybe we should review it in the autumn. And actually, that's all that come out of that meeting after 3.5 hours. I think he pushed aside all that the public was saying, certainly what the elected representatives were saying. It was purely a position. We were a commercial company, we had to make money, responsible to shareholders, not to the community. So that system. So it's only us actually embarrassed him to come here, actually, and he did apologise for not responding to our petition and letters. So it's got somewhere that way. But I think to keep control of this issue and keep an eye on it, to make sure they do have their review and something comes out of it, is to keep it this committee. And not like, I don't know why you keep trying to push it off into another committee for. Keep it on scrutiny, we can keep an eye on it and put pressure on it. And actually, and I do it also, so I do welcome Councillor Austin as Cabinet has done a lot of work on this, and I do appreciate it. I mean, she's done from a difficult position where we're not the Transport Authority. So, but however, I mean, the main thrust is to come out of that, is the review in sets. Hopefully we can be looking at September, October, is to keep it with this committee. Otherwise, it's all been a waste of time.
Councillor Rossiterton.
Just come back, please, because Councillor Sean Woodward did say that the result of the survey that they'd be doing, etc., it would be at least the 26th of October before we would get any response to the consultation that we're going through. We've just finished going through as well. So we'll be continuing with the work anyway. We're not going to stop. And anything that comes out of this, I have always sent to every councillor. I believe that not everybody reads the bulletin. So instead of putting it on the bulletin, I send it out to all council members. It's much easier then if you could take your email off and advise your constituents as to what is actually going on. But I think we're all fully committed to the bus service. The COG is doing sterling work. We have professional people on there, and they are looking at innovative ways of looking at transport in another means if there are problems in the future. But at the moment, we're looking at what is happening. I haven't got a crystal ball. Thank you.
Councillor Regan.
issue of cogs. I mean, I've attended the COG meetings. I have no faith in them as well, actually. All right, it's a general chat and we're talking about it, but we're not facing on the whole issue of actually the commercial services, the cuts of commercial services. Now the rest of it, of the subsidised sector, and a bit to try and rush to pick up those gaps. It's until you tackle the lack of commercial services, it's no good. So I think we have to keep the idea of the commercial services with this committee and keep an eye on it.
Councillor Musson.
Thanks, Chair. First thing I'd like to do, Chair, is to praise the officers, because throughout the issues we've had and the complaints that I've had from Tadley residents, and Tadley is a large conurbation, quite a distance from Basingstoke, where the buses are very important. So I've had a lot of lobbying from residents on buses. I've spoken with Councillor Austin, I've spoken regularly with the officers, and I've got every respect for the officers, because they do a great job, and they're in a very difficult position, because as Councillor Reagan has said, we're dealing with a commercial organisation where we have very little control. And so we've got us and the residents pushing the officers who are discussing with Stagecoach. Very little pressure we can put on them. So they're in a difficult position, but I think they do quite a good job, and I'd like to thank them for that. When we heard about the issues, I think there was around about that time, shortly after, there was a consultation, and I encourage as many residents as possible to feedback to the consultation, to give our officers ideas. They have come up with a pilot scheme for Tadley. I've voiced my concerns about that to Councillor Osserton and the officers, and I'll do so again if I may, and that is that I think it's for a relatively short time, unfortunately, because of the cost. It would have been better if we could have had it for longer, because if you face the facts that if you're looking for a job, or if you're leaving college and or you want to start college in Basingstoke, for example, and you live in Tadley, you aren't going to make the commitment if you think the bus service might not be here in 6 months' time. So if we're going to do a pilot, we really need it to be for 12 months or longer, if possible. But I realise there's a cash problem there. But for me, judging the outcome of success based on a short length of time, less than a year, is not going to give us the full picture, because I do believe people won't make a commitment if they think the buses won't be there. Lastly, it's a bit disappointing really that we are dealing with a commercial organisation, and I don't know whether there's anything we can do specifically about Tadley, but I noticed that the frequency of the buses in the daytime is pretty good. In fact, I would say almost too frequent, and then all of a sudden you get to 9 o'clock in the evening and that's it, buses have gone. So it seems they are making a good deal of revenue. They won't tell us, I'm sure, in the day. Might it not be possible for them to use just some of that to help us to provide some subsidy from our side, and then perhaps we can have some buses in an evening, where at the moment they just stop at a certain time, and of course that puts a lot of pressure, because people who want to work, nurses at the hospital, for example, and there's lots of jobs that you can't apply for in the town if you know you're not going to be able to get a bus after 9 o'clock. So it would be good if perhaps they could consider slightly less frequency in the day to push some of that saving into the evening. Thank you.
I'm just saying that is something that we have been discussing with them at the time, but obviously they say it's very expensive with the buses, etc., for putting, say, a bus on for 4 people, but we are talking to them about that as well. And that's part of the review we're doing at the moment, to see if we can improve it for our residents. Because we do want everybody on the bus rather than in the car if we possibly can. But we have to have a good service and a frequent good service, and the fares are comparable with everybody else. So we need that. And that's something we're talking to them about. And they are in discussion with us.
I'm glad to see we've got the head of commissioning and governance with us. I wonder, Lisa, if you could advise us on the issue of cross-subsidisation of loss-making services by commercial services.
Thank you, Chair. We've had quite substantial advice from legal services in respect to some of the limitations of the Transport Act. And we have looked for loopholes, and we have looked to see where there's some flexibility there. At the moment, we pay our subsidy direct to the County Council, and they pay that to Stagecoach on our behalf. What we're trying to do now is establish benchmarking by which we can assure members more readily about the value for money that we're getting for that subsidy in terms of better contract management relationships between us and county, because at the moment it seems historically we have paid monies to county and not actually been 100% sure where that money's been spent, what on, and to what benefit for our residents. So what we're trying to do now is have a better understanding from that at county. There were some early complications with that. They had what's called a combination agreement with Stagecoach, which actually meant county weren't really sure what was being paid for where. And that was indeed a problem for us, because when we were trying to do our public transport subsidy review, the data we were collecting, was not as accurate as we would have liked. We've now worked on that, and a lot of the services are being re-tendered by county this year, and we are getting our foot in the door in terms of helping and assisting and advising Hampshire County Council on their procurement exercise. We're seeing documents up front. So there is a better relationship there, and certainly a combination agreement is something that the county would not commit to now, so they will also have more certainty with their contracts. Now, regardless on what we do or don't do with our subsidy, it's important that we start to make those steps with the county to improve the information that we have, so we can give you members better information.
Have you had any advice on whether the commercial operators are allowed to cross-subsidise loss-making routes?
In terms of Stagecoach themselves subsidising, Stagecoach can put on whatever routes they want at whatever cost that they would like, Councillor Watts. It's their willingness to do so as a commercial operator. Certainly what we have found is by having closer relationships with Stagecoach, we've been able to say, well, is there a possibility of you doing something here? An example, and this is just an example from when we did the public transport subsidy review, we had an issue with the Stratford Say Shopper, which is a route that is funded by 3 authorities, and one authority was withdrawing its funding, and it was likely that that route might stop. Because of our relationship with Stagecoach, we went to them and said, is there anything you can do? And we had a look, and there was what I know about bus numbers, there was a possibility that the number 14 could pop along, pick up those people from Stratford Say and offer a service, and they weren't going to charge us for that additional kind of little loop that went out. Some other things have happened, and that hasn't needed to happen with that particular service, but it's just an example whereby if we have good relationships with them, we can go to them and say we've got these issues, and actually that was something that they were going to do to help us that was free. So it is about continuing to have those conversations. And just to assure members as well, we did pick up and had noted down all of the kind of the smaller but important issues that residents and members raised last week. Some of the double-decker buses not being able to get pushchairs on, those issues. We've noted all of those, and we will be asking what Stagecoach have done about those smaller issues when we have our next liaison meeting.
Thank you. Gavin James.
Thank you. I'll make a few comments on the sort of 2 separate issues that seem to have come along. But the first one, obviously, with Stagecoach's business. From what I heard and found out, and obviously buses aren't perhaps the hottest topic in my ward, but from what we discovered, the bus company thought about changing things in September. They ummed and ahed about it in October. They kind of made a decision in November, and the first we heard about in the council, or certain councils heard, was in December. And their view wasn't they weren't consulted; they were told. And to be honest, that's not a consultation. So to try and get a consultation done in 3 months is frankly ridiculous. I don't think they've appreciated the sensitivities of the bus service, that this is people's courses they've already signed up to a college that they can't get to, and jobs they've already taken believing they can get there. It's a big thing to change buses for those who use them, and I don't think Stagecoach realised that. I think they've realised it better now, but they've got to get their head around the idea that a consultation is, we're thinking of reviewing the buses. There's some buses that no longer make money or aren't busy, and get the public involved in shaping the service. I'm quite convinced if the public were more involved in shaping the service, we'd probably have less subsidised buses, because the service would actually work for the people and they'd fill the buses. So Stagecoach missed a trick there. The other thing that came across to me was how rubbish Stagecoach were. They said they did their review to cut buses. They're a business. They're a commercial operator. When they were questioned about what they were doing to promote the use of buses, there was kind of tumbleweeds blowing across the committee room. There was nothing. They just wanted to strip out. All these changes have all happened, and now there's 2 buses less leaving a depot a day. That's the grand conclusion, and again, roughly the same number of passengers. I'm sure, and I haven't read our vision for a while, that our vision as a council is to have good public transport connections. I'm sure the county has a similar vision, and our public transport provider needs to have the same vision. If we're dedicated to increasing the use of buses, increasing the use of public transport, surely Stagecoach must have the same vision. Otherwise, they're a pretty lousy partner. I don't know when their contract's up for renewal, when we can re-tender the bus service, but we really need to look at what is our vision and what is Stagecoach's vision, because it needs to be the same as ours. In terms of the subsidised buses, which I think, yes, it may go to a committee, but I think it's something we need to put in our diary to come back on. Anyone who is in receipt of public money should be open to public scrutiny. And since I've been a councillor, back on the old community wellbeing days, when you ask the question about, well, how many people catch that bus? It's commercially sensitive. I don't know whether we're funding buses that don't have anybody on them, in which case we're wasting our money, or I don't know whether we're subsidising buses that actually are economically viable to the operator. We need to know. So I appreciate what the officers just said in terms of we're working on that to see, are we getting best value? But I think that's something we as a scrutiny committee must keep hold of. We need to see in 6 months' time, are we getting best value? Prove to us what you're doing with the £680,000, whatever it is, because I need to explain to my residents where that money is going. And at the moment, I can't. I can just say we subsidise some buses, but I don't know where. We've got a list. Councillor Harvey read out the list last time, but I don't know why we're subsidising those buses. Who's catching them? And so we don't have any access to some sort of numbers or any kind of detail. That needs to happen. I support the officer in all her quest to try and get better information. I appreciate we've got the county in the way, or they appear to be in the way as opposed to a servant to us. But they need to collect that information. We need to have that information to find out where our council taxpayers' money is going, because that's our responsibility to know where that money is going. And at the moment, we don't.
Point out we haven't discussed the subsidised services with Stagecoach here. We were talking solely about the commercial services, except that I cited the very large amount of subsidy we pay as a reason for them seeing us as partners. Councillor Harvey's next to speak. Put on read up.
Sorry, Chair, just on that very specific point.
Yes.
Whilst you say that we were only talking about the commercial services, a lot of the residents came in with very significant points, which, because of the construct of the debate, actually related to complaints that they were making about service for which I believe we are subsidising, because I understand that after a certain time in the evening and on public holidays and on certain routes, we're already we already pay the route. And because there was such obfuscation between what they do and what we pay for them to do, it's not as clear cut as you imply, Chair, I'm afraid.
One of the things that came up was, I think, the bus that goes round, is it the number 12, that was, when basically Stagecoach forgot a large part of Grove existed. And when we approached them and say, you realise you missed a large chunk of Basingstoke that your Google Earth map didn't pick up, they said, oh, well, OK, we'll put another service in. And the county guy was very proud of the fact that he'd spent £40,000 subsidising his service to go in to replace one that had disappeared. So when you change a service and we say, my God, you've lopped off half of Basingstoke, and we have to put a service back in, we have to subsidise that service. So the two are linked, and it's very difficult to break that link.
I agree with you entirely that we want to keep the link. The trouble is the law isn't on our side, which is why partnership and liaison is the only way that we're going to get anything out of this. The next speaker actually on our list is Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the most telling comments on that night from Mr. Dyer was that question of, why have you done this? And his response was, well, we missed our financial targets. What financial targets? Well, he couldn't answer that, or refused to answer that. They are one of the most profitable companies in their industry going. They have not missed their financial targets. What he actually meant to say was, I'm not making as much profit as the company wants me to make. That's the truth of the matter. Now, the issue is that he took 2 buses off of the fleet running around Basingstoke and Dean. That's what he admitted to on the night. What he also admitted to, and I think was very interesting, was when the county council portfolio holder was speaking, their silence on a lot of those issues, and you gave him the opportunity to come in at various points, their silence on a lot of those issues was deafening. And I think their relationship as a commercial body to the subsidised service, as others have said, is incredibly important. The way they use the subsidised services to offset and manage and manipulate their own service provision, I think, is quite important for us to consider. So, what do? You've presented a form of words this evening that you're looking at. I would like to go in a different direction, really, and be a lot more firm in our recommendations. And I think there are 4 areas that fell out of last week. 4 areas that we should recommend to our cabinet are the principles by which we should be driving this debate. And a partnership is two-way. At the moment, I think the partnership is us speaking to Stagecoach and Stagecoach not returning the favour, really, and not responding in true partnership. Appreciate what the cabinet member's trying to do. Sorry. The first one is affordability of buses. We know from the survey of young people, of over 3,000 young people in the borough, that the affordability of public transport in this borough is a massive issue. So as a principle, as a local authority, we must be pushing for better affordability of public transport in this town and borough. The second point, I think, is route design and community input to that, and others have already alluded to that. That has to be a principle that we look to, and I'd like to see that as a recommendation from this body. The third point that leads on to then is meaningful consultation. Surely, as a principle involved in all of this, we have got to say we demand, and I know it's a big strong word, demand, but nonetheless demand proper consultation on these issues. And finally, and this is perhaps the most controversial principle of the lot, we are talking about a commercial entity. We're talking about a body that receives subsidy, I know, but we're talking about a commercial entity. I think we need to be looking at how we as a public authority responsible to our residents and for their well-being seeks to encourage competition in this town from other bus operators that would give Stagecoach a run for their money. Because at the moment, they are the monopoly. They have absolute control, if you like, of the bus network in Basingstoke. And there is no competition. There's no proper bus market in Basingstoke. You could never describe it as such at all. If we were to be able to look to that and explore that, and I know other towns have done this very successfully, why can't we? So really, I think on the commercial side, Chair, those are 4 areas or 4 recommendations I'd like to put forward. As far as the subsidised element goes, we need the review of that. We do need a review of the subsidised elements, just as has been described. And the other principle I would like to adopt or put forward to recommend that this committee adopt on the subsidised route is it's pretty clear the cabinet member's made his decision. It's pretty clear, as is usual with county. They'll have their decision date and he'll make his decision. He wouldn't have published the report before now with the decision in it, in the way he's done it without making the decision. Consultation's pretty meaningless to them in the way they go about making the decision. So they've made the decision. The issue for us is, what does that mean for Basingstoke? So I would like to have far more information, something to come out of this meeting of what does the £1.5 million cut that cabinet member is going to make in the decision actually mean for us in Basingstoke, so that we understand that. And then, picking up the officer's point, Lisa's point about, okay, so where do we then go with what we might be able to do to mitigate those issues? Because someone's going to have to pick up the tab and run with that, because county aren't. And maybe that's where we come in with our money, Chair, and what we're thinking of maybe you're not doing. I'm just looking for something practical with substance that we can genuinely do, because most of the residents left that meeting saying, so what difference is it going to make? And that's what it's got to be about, actually.
Councillor Regan, are you waiting to speak again? Some time ago you caught the Vice Chairman's eye.
Just, Councillor Harvey, on a nutshell, has done that's quite good. I'd just like to pick up on the route design, I think, which is the whole issue of February 16th, really. And as I said to Mr. Dyer, I mean, I said, we all realise that, you know, demographics, routes, population shift, things change and nothing stays the same forever. So the older point is there was no need for him to do it the way they did do it. It's made a consultation, and we can sit down and talk through the liaison And through this council, we're giving you subsidies. We want to talk about the commercial routes too and our routes. So, we through the portfolio holder actually we talk to them about the routes. I mean, because still half of my ward don't have a bus, and Brighton Hill and other places are affected as well. So they got it wrong, and they probably can't admit it at the moment. But that's probably why you offer the review after 3 hours of battering. Actually, I think. But I don't think you come here, the managing director, with an offer a review. It's the strength of feeling at the meeting. So I think I think Councillor Harvey's found a way forward, and I support that.
Councillor Ossleton, are you expecting this review to enable us to input to the design of the routes in the borough?
That was part of the consultation. Yes, it was. I'm quite happy with what they've said here, because this is work that we're already doing. If we think about it, we spend an awful lot of money on the subsidies. The subsidising we stopped because of the Hampshire County Council consultation that was going on, but it's still part of the ongoing work of the COG that we're actually doing. We've got to remember that we're putting this 600,000 in a year. And we're not the transport company. We could hand it all back and say to Hampshire County Council, there you are, you do it. So that's something we need to be mindful about as well. We are not the transport people. But all of this is something that we are looking at, and we have been looking at as part of the COG, in line with what, as you've said, is going to happen after October the 26th. We don't want to be sitting there thinking, oh, well, we'll just wait till October the 26th and see what they're going to say. We're already beginning to look at what we think they're going to do and have put plans in place. So that has been discussed. And as everything I do, I've said to you before, does go on to the your email, so that at least you know where you are and where we're going. And I think that's a good way of you knowing where we're going with this. But I agree, nothing on this at all.
We have, of course, recently agreed a constitution with overview and scrutiny committees revised, and I don't think that we should pass on anything without being within that constitutional structure. Can I say that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, called CEP, has exactly the same powers as this committee, and it specifically has public transport in its brief. And that's the reason that I am suggesting, and have tentatively agreed with Rob Golding, the chairman of it, that they should take it forward, because I'm concerned in two ways. Firstly, this committee really has looked at the past and is looking at the immediate short term. I would like us to pass it across to CEP as a long-term ongoing commitment to work with Stagecoach and other partners. And I would certainly expect that the cabinet member, whatever other arrangements around, whether they're MAPs or COGs or whatever, would be working closely with that committee. Now, envisage if this committee decides to keep hold of public transport, and then we decide to keep hold of low-cost housing, because we're so much better at it than anybody else, and so on. I mean, this committee is going to put itself out of business very quickly. And so I really believe that we should manage a transition to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee that's got this explicit responsibility. But the important thing is, what are we going to be doing? And I think what Paul Harvey's put forward is an interesting detailing of the agenda. And do I understand that you've accepted the points that Councillor Harvey put forward as an agenda for the future reviews?
There are already points that we're looking at, that we have been looking at for a number of months now. There's nothing new in there to me.
With Stagecoach?
With Stagecoach, yes.
And when
we're looking at routes and different ways to getting from A to B quicker. We're also managing meaningful consultation. That's come out of the early autumn. Commercial subsidies, we're looking at that at the moment as well, correct? Yes, we are. And competition. Competition, there again, we have to look at the statute and law. And subsidies, as I've said before, we're talking about that as well.
And are you proposing to report to those at an overview and scrutiny committee?
Yes, we would be reporting that, and we will also be having consultation with the general public. We've said that at the relevant time when we know what's happening, that we will have a communication plan, and we desperately need one.
Well, two speakers so far would like it to come back to this committee in September, I think, as an additional item. My own proposition is it goes to the first full meeting of CEP in September, but that timetable?
No, that September we wouldn't be able to do it. No. That the consultation that was part of the work we're doing at the moment doesn't come out until the end of October. We'll carry on with what we're doing, with the way forward. But I would say in a bit later on, then yes, we would report back to a scrutiny to the CEP on the full work we're doing. Meanwhile, if anything came out in between then it would be communicated to members, as I always do.
Yes, I don't think members are really talking about just receiving communications. They're wanting to
In the
review and
interim
influence
period
what's
until the
happening.
paper is produced on something substantial.
And Stagecoach are talking about a review in the autumn, in which we're hoping you'll be fully engaged and you'll be keeping the council as a whole engaged. Yes, Lisa.
Chair, perhaps I can clarify. My understanding from what Stagecoach said last week and in subsequent conversations, when they offered to do the review, they said timing-wise, it made sense for them to do that after the conclusion of the Hampshire County Council consultation. So our expectation was that the review would happen post the 26th of October.
Okay, Gavin James.
I was just going to add to Councillor Harvey's list, which I endorse it, I guess, where he says number one, affordability of buses. I'd like to see the word promotion put in there, affordability and promotion of buses. The two are actually linked. I certainly think our young people with better season tickets, season passes, and maybe catch a bus to the leisure park and get 20% off, whatever. Those kind of promotions could work and would work and make Basingstoke a much smaller place for our young people so they can get around. The other thing, I think there was just one issue that I felt sorry for Mr. Dyer. It's a controversial thing to say. I've got my wrong notepad with me, but listening to the residents last week, 3 residents came in and they said they were most upset because they found they always had to go to the town centre and out again. They couldn't get a direct route. And another 3 residents were very, very annoyed that they couldn't, of the opposite, that they couldn't get straight into town. They had to go around the houses, and bus took them on a little merry-go-round rather than the direct route to town. So clearly, within those consultations, there's also, we've got to talk a lot more to residents, well, certainly Stagecoach have, or us as a local authority, to find out whether or not the majority actually would like a direct route, or whether the majority would like to go round, or whether there is capacity to deal with both. Because unfortunately, everyone wants to go to different places at different times. And certainly, I mean, looking at the bus that goes nearest my house, if I catch it, it would take me 55 minutes to get to town, or I could walk to town in 5 minutes, which is a bit bizarre. So I think there's something about building realistic expectations about where we're going to go with the buses, because, you know, what sort of service do people want? Have we got the town centre hub? And if you want to go from Brighton Hill to the hospital, you go Brighton Hill into town, swap buses and go out to the hospital, or a runaround bus? Is that what people want and they're happy to take longer to get places? Because I don't think anyone knows the answer to that question. And certainly residents were calling for different things, and we're not going to please all those residents. So I think building realistic expectations of people is important.
Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chairman. Last thing I want to do is repeat all the 3.5-hour debate we had a little time ago. I mean, I think we've just got to be in the best prepared position come late October to react to what we know is coming. There's no doubt in my mind that the County Council's made its decision. Councillor Woodward all but said that, I believe, so I have no illusions about that. And the consequences of that, which will impact upon Stagecoach and their review, are obvious, really, and we've got to deal with that. No ifs, no buts. We know what's coming, and we can prevaricate about this all we want to. In terms of how most effectively we deal with this, I've long time thought, and it's a question of what this council can do to actually promote this, is real competition in terms of the provision of transport services in this borough. I mean, the irony, I think I said it on the night, in terms of deregulation, is we end up with this private monopoly. And to call this public transport is a bit of a misnomer anyway. What this is a private transport company providing a service for the public, brackets, when it chooses to do so. Nothing much more complicated than that. It's not my understanding of public transport. And as Councillor James just said, really, in regard to the best interest of their own shareholders, nothing much more complicated than that. And the real clue to this, if we could do it, and there are many reasons why it would be very difficult, is an element of competition in terms of the way these services are provided in Basingstoke. Now, if I had confidence, and I say this, that the COG could deal with that, then I'd be happy with that. But I don't think it can, really, quite frankly. And I'm not even sure, I must be wrong in this, I didn't realise that COGS could report to something like the CEP anyway. I thought it was direct to the Cabinet in terms of real action, in terms of the COG recommendations. And it seems to me this committee, I think it's got a meeting in early November, could well be the vehicle for the way this thing is moved forward. And I prefer that route much more, Chairman, with respect to the one that you've proposed. And I think with the amendment that Councillor James made, I think we've got the outline of 4 or 5 good elements here to a proposal that can be referred on to Cabinet, I think, but certainly in terms of the recommendation that would flow from this committee tonight, I think we should adopt what Councillor Harvey has suggested. I'd certainly second that if that's required, and that's what I'd like to see us adopt tonight as our next course of action.
Councillor Still.
Thank you. To move this on, I would like to propose, Chairman, that we move forward with your recommendation for this to go forward to the Community Environment and Partnership Committees, which has teeth anyway. So that I would like to propose that. Councillor Potter's proposed his recommendation. Shall we take a vote on it?
I'd like to defer taking a vote on where we're going, because we're still discussing what we're going to call for and demand. But, Councillor Musson.
Thanks, Chair. I agreed with the points Councillor Harvey mentioned, but there's one point mentioned by Councillor James I'd like to pick up on. That's promotion, because I find it slightly embarrassing when I talk to residents and have to admit that one of the reasons that the buses were cut, bus services were cut, were because they were not used. And this is when residents are complaining to me about the fact that there aren't buses. I have to say to them it's because nobody uses them. And that you know, when I think that there's about 12 to 15,000 vehicle movements a day, it's a weekday, along the A340 between Tedley and Basingstoke, you would think the people would be falling over themselves to use buses. But then to be told that the bus services are being cut because of little use seems to me that we're all failing somewhere. I think that has been picked up a little bit, but I don't think there's enough emphasis on it. You know, we as an authority, the county and the bus company can't be happy with a situation where we're seeing more and more vehicle movements as each year goes by, and we're having to cut buses because they're not being used. That there's something drastically wrong somewhere, and I'm wondering if perhaps we're not focusing enough on exactly why that is.
Yes, why that is not where I expected to end. We did talk a bit about promotion at the previous meeting, and Councillor James has brought that up again now. I find it amazing that there are people who seriously don't actually know there's a bus going where they want to go. But perhaps, well, I should ask, will the COG be looking into why there is little take-up of buses?
Chair, the original focus of the Commissioning Outcome Group for Transport was about access to transport. So when we looked at the evidence and identified the needs, particularly for young people, a point I think Councillor Harvey mentioned earlier, that was of particular concern. In terms of one of the sessions is about gap analysis and idea modelling, we will look to identify gaps in route design and then look at ways of filling that, whether it's with money, route changes, etc., etc. So that is what the Commissioning Outcome Group will be looking at specifically. we've expanded the original remit of the commissioning outcome group in order to be able to respond to the Hampshire County Council consultation, because it's the gap analysis session, which is exactly what we're talking about, the county leaving gaps in our existing provision. So that was the intention behind that move, Chair.
Councillor Cupid.
I agree with the points that Councillor Harvey said, and the points that Councillor James has said, and the points that Councillor Potter has said. However, I would like to second what Councillor Still has said, and I'll tell you why. I came into this debate cold at the last scrutiny meeting. There were a lot of issues that we did not have papers on. I've just been Googling a 2012 paper from the House of Parliament on the obligations of operator behaviour and recommendations for restrictions on changes to services and frequencies through increased registration notice periods. And there's a whole raft of stuff that I just don't know, and I believe that Councillor Still is completely correct, as are you, that this gets taken to the right scrutiny committee in the first place. If that scrutiny committee then fails, having done its due diligence with the information, I'm reading on the web now about code of conduct that we can demand, about punctuality and performance that we can demand, that the traffic, I'm reading here that the traffic commissioner can fine Stagecoach if we're unhappy with the changes that are being made. Now, I've never been told about that, and I wasn't told that at the last meeting, and I'm not part of the relevant committee. So what I strongly recommend is we go back to the drawing board, we read what's on the web in Parliament, a paper that was produced by the coalition government in 2012. We look into the code of conduct we can negotiate, it's called the Code of Conduct with the local bus operator we can negotiate. We can have the traffic commissioner come and visit us if we're upset. And I agree with Councillor Harvey. The county is key. But instead of us talking about how to resolve problems, actually we need to go back to basics, which is to find out where the problems lie before we start writing cheques to Hampshire County Council into a great big black hole of money that we'll never see and services we'll never receive.
Councillor Harvey, I think.
The dilemma we've got is that Hampshire are the Transport Authority and we're not. And the problem is that we can't compel the Transport Commissioner to come to Basingstoke, but County can. We can't do the fines. They can, but it's how we do it. And the thing I'm agreeing with, actually, I want to support what you're saying, but it's the direction of travel we go in. We ain't disagreeing around the table. This isn't, ain't going to cook this up into something that we don't need to cook it up into. The reality is, as a scrutiny committee, we're a reviewing body. We have looked at the buses because we inherited it from the previous system and the motion that came. We've reviewed it. If we agree a set of principles tonight, and we've captured 5, including what Councillor Musson and Councillor James have already added to what I already said, that's 5 principles that are recommendations from this committee to the Cabinet member. If the Cabinet member wants to, she can work with, or they can work with, the CEP, if they choose to come up with a policy. That's fine, that's what it's meant to be. But we're the reviewing body. So we should, at some point, when it is appropriate, have this back to review our recommendations. How far have you got? What have you delivered? What have you done? That's what we're about. So, yeah, we want our recommendations to be taken on board. We want them to drive the policy agenda. It's up to the Cabinet member what they do now in the context of developing the policy. We then hold the Cabinet member to account for that. We're being pretty clear, I think, tonight, and I know Councillor Austin's listening and she said what she said this evening, which is positive. It's all positive. None of this is negative. It's where we go with it. So, if we can, let's agree these recommendations. Let's let the Cabinet member do the job we want them to do, and let's hold them to account at a future meeting for the recommendations we may make this evening. If that then involves her using a CEP committee to help her to create the policy, so be it. That's in their gift to do. Our business is review. So let's pick a date in the future, November the 4th, or even into whatever is appropriate, to review this on the progress we're making, and then we can justify it to our residents, can't we? And if not, we've got to justify or come up with recommendations for why it's not happening.
I'd like to test the committee's view on 2 aspects. And we have got a fairly precise list of issues originally proposed by Councillor Harvey, expanded by Councillor James, expanded by Councillor Musson, Nobody has dissented with any of those. Is it the view of the committee that we should put that together as a package that we want dealt with?
Yeah.
Right. Well, that is the committee's view, and we want to take that forward. Then there's the issue of the mechanism. Well, we know, of course, the mechanism is that we give that list to the cabinet member, and the cabinet member knows that she's got various mechanisms to work on. My view is that it shouldn't come back to this committee because there's clearly a committee with documented responsibility for these issues that has the powers of overview and scrutiny. But I hear strong voices, but I don't necessarily hear majority voices saying that this committee should retain that review responsibility. Councillor James.
I think, to be honest, Chair, Councillor Harvey nailed it spot on. We've got the list, we've given that to the portfolio holder. Obviously, she can use the CEP as much as she likes in terms of formulating the policy. We need to come back at some point and see, is the policy, have our recommendations been included within the policy? Have they made a difference? Has the policy improved things? Realistically, that might be a very short paper in 6 months' time saying, actually, the bus service is now fantastic. People come to Basingstoke just to catch a bus around Basingstoke. I can't see it, but we can try. But obviously, realistically, to take the ideas away, formulate a policy, put that policy into some kind of action and have some actions from that policy and see how they've worked is not going to happen by November. But I think in 6 months' time, it may be a short item or a long item, depending what happens. But I think 6 months' time, it doesn't hurt to have in our agenda somewhere in there that we're going to come back and look and see whatever happened to our very first scrutiny meeting and what came out of it. Because we need to learn to see whether it's successful or not as well. So it's not just a case of testing the portfolio holder, it's also testing ourselves to see if we were effective in what we put forward and what we proposed. But it needn't be a big item. We're not getting Mr. Dyer back, yes, necessarily. It's just, let's give it 6 months, let CEP do whatever they want with it, but we should just have an item on the agenda in 6 months' time to say, how did it work? What came out of it?
It remains to be seen if the other overview and scrutiny committees think they're there to be used by the cabinet members, which was the phrase. As some of the people here will be members of those, I suspect that won't be the case. I think, firstly, I don't think we're capable of going away from this meeting knowing precisely what we're saying. And I would like to ask a group of councillors Harvey, James and Musson to cooperate on helping the officers to document what the matters are that have been reviewed here, because in that case, we've got it.
And we can cross-check when they send it out to us if it's met what we've said.
Well, the cabinet member and head of service have been here to hear what's being said anyway. Councillor Regan?
Picking up on what's been said, so it's coming back to this committee then?
That's the next thing we're moving on to, because there's a clear division.
Obviously, you're trying to direct it away. Let's have a vote.
Well, that's really where we're heading, Colin. But I mean, there are some people who have expressed no view. My recommendation is, Emily.
Just to help us on, the officer very helpfully reaffirmed what our role is, which is to review backward what happens. So if it's truly a burning issue for you, and your party or both your parties or you individually do not feel that the issues have happened, no, I know, but you're representing. But so consequently, the way it seems to me that scrutiny takes place is that you then ask in 6 months' time, if you're not happy, for us, the scrutiny committee, to look into the failings that you believe have taken place. We don't forward project failings, we just bring them to the table when there is a failing. And I think that's the way we deal with it. You diarise, you look, you see whether you feel that it's been done, and then you bring it back then, but not put it forward now, today, in 6 months' time as a failure.
Councillor Harvey?
Slight at cross purposes, I think it isn't just the role of scrutiny to say you failed, it's also the role of scrutiny to say you fulfilled the recommendation. it's not just a negative role. But the key point here, I think, is that this is not a decision that is call-inable. This is not a decision that a cabinet member is going to make a decision and have a decision notice on that we can then come back to, because it doesn't exist like that, because it's a portfolio holder role with the county, and we can't call county decisions in on this. If the cabinet member comes up with a proposal to review the subsidies later on, that it's our money, then that's a different ballgame, but that's not what we're talking about. So the recommendations that we've now agreed go to the cabinet member. The cabinet member will action them as per whatever process of policy development goes on. If the cabinet member chooses to include CEP in that, great, and that's the start of a good process for the policy development side. As a scrutiny committee, I agree with what Councillor James and others have said. Let's come back to this and say, in 6 months or 8 months at the appropriate point, have you fulfilled the recommendations that we as a committee made? If you have, great. If not, we'd like to know why. If not, and there's reasons, we need to understand those reasons and adjust and perhaps make some fresh recommendations in light of new evidence. But we've made them, we should own them. CEP can help along the way, but that's in policy development. That's not our job.
I think the decision is clear. It's whether or not we diarise for this to come back to this committee. And what the CEP committee do is a matter for them. The chairman's willing to take it back. So I don't see any way of resolving this other than by a vote. So can I see those in favour of this committee having a future item report back on this issue? And those against? Okay, it'll be put on a future scrutiny agenda. Probably the earliest will be November, but the earliest it would be, but probably later. Thank you very much for coming. We must move on now. Now, the performance panel met yesterday, which does mean we're, I think, less prepared for coming to this meeting than we would normally expect to be. Now, we've all got in our agendas the full set of reports that went to the performance panel, and that's the way we intend to proceed. But as far as this meeting's concerned, we're going to ask the chairman of the performance panel to draw attention to those issues which he, or the panel, believed this committee should be considering and taking action on. So, can I have everyone's attention, please? Right. Councillor Keating is the chairman of the performance panel.
Thank you, Chair. The performance panel was constructed between the last meeting and this one, which was 2 weeks ago. The performance panel actually met yesterday. And in front of you, you have two things. In the papers that you were sent in preparation for this meeting, and which you have all no doubt read, are all the papers that went to the performance panel yesterday. And you have now just received, because they were only produced today, the notes of that meeting which took place yesterday. The meeting had to approve the terms of reference under which it will work, and it did. The meeting had the principal items which were documented and in your packs of this nature. Now, you need to remember that this is a whole year's report. This is a report of the whole of last year. It's not a quarterly report, it's the whole of last year. And it uses jargon or AG, red, amber, green. If you come across RAG in the documents, it means red, amber, green. It doesn't mean rag. Okay? And the performance panel met. It's looked at all of the items listed there, and you've got the supporting documents already. Of those supporting items, the performance panel, as you will see on your latest sheet, has got 3 asterisk items, whereby the performance panel made specific reference to the 3 asterisk items. They are Junction 6, broadband issues, and household waste recycling. The Junction 6 issue was raised by Councillor Cubitt, and if you, with your permission, Chair, I would like to invite her to just make a brief comment about that so that you'll understand the concerns. Is that okay with you? Thank you. Is that okay with you, Chair? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keating. Yeah, the reference that I made to the amendments to Junction 6 were that on this sheet of paper, this aspect of the areas that are evaluated was deemed to have been green, all good, all okay, all fine. And I don't know how aware people are, but there was, firstly, we're providing a significant amount of money toward this improvement. Secondly, councillors were advised of the improvement that were going to be made to the junction, and at the 11th hour, the design was completely changed. And none of us were, as far as I'm aware, advised of this change. And it's a very significant change, because originally the junction was going to come from the ring road over the centre of the roundabout to Junction 6, and suddenly it's going through the centre, and now there's a big spur road going onto the A30, and there's a big spur road coming off the A30. And that was presented as a fait accompli about a week or 2 weeks before the elections in May. So my point at performance was, how is it green? Is it green because everything that was planned happened, or because how can it be green if the design's completely changed? That's the first thing. And I said, if you buy an apple and you get a grapefruit or a pomelo, how can it still be classified as the same product? That's the first thing. The second thing is, I understand that there are 2 significant other aspects to the works that have been carried out. Trees were cut down that were of a diameter that is not permitted to be cut down post-nesting period. And the nesting period cut-off date had definitely taken place. So whomever cut the vegetation on the centre of the roundabout was in breach of some very strong, strict rules, which are expected of anybody who is doing clearance work in our borough and, in fact, the whole of the country. First thing. Second thing, so that how did it achieve green status? Secondly, dormice. Apparently, dormice were discovered when they cut these very large trees that were well in excess of the normal diameter of tree that's permitted to be cut after the nesting season has commenced, and they discovered dormice. And that also did not stop the clearance work from going forward, which is also in direct contravention of some very strict rules that are imposed upon developers and residents alike. So again, how did it achieve green status? So on that basis, that is why in the performance panel yesterday, I asked if we could have the portfolio holder advise us as to why it had been afforded a green flag. In the papers that we received, interestingly enough, yesterday, the portfolio holder was Jaya Vardner, but I see that the papers have been amended and the portfolio holder is now Councillor Raphael. So that there was obviously an error in the documents that I'd seen earlier. And finally, cost implications. Did anybody get advised when the amendments to the design, which were very dramatic and significant and to whom nobody seems to have been consulted, does anyone know whether the costs are to our advantage or to our disadvantage? And again, why did it get afforded a green status? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. Can I just continue? The first astute item, which is Junction 6, asks for the portfolio holder to provide additional information to enable us to understand what happened, to enable us to take it forward. The second item, asterisk with broadband issues, and again is currently asking the portfolio holder to provide additional information in relation to rural coverage, and noting that we were looking for that information by September so we can examine that information. So there were two pieces of information that we were looking for on issues that the performance panel agreed were serious. The third item is the household waste recycling issue, which, as you'll see from the document which you've got, failed totally throughout the whole of last year. Now, when we look at household waste recycling, as chair of the performance panel and reflecting the concerns of the performance panel, I'm suggesting that that one item should be an item for scrutiny by this whole panel. Thank you.
Does anybody want to ask any questions of Councillor Keating?
Yes.
Councillor Still.
Thank you. It's not really a question, it's a comment on Councillor Cubitt's Junction 6. When I saw the devastation of that roundabout, I went straight on to County Council and asked what the hell was going on, basically. And I was very concerned about the dormice. They assured me that they cut the trees to a certain length, so the dormice, in hibernation as they were at the time, when they wake up, they've still got a tree stump, so they're okay. And I said, well, it sounded a bit like a joke. How are they going to get off the roundabout to... Anyway, so basically, I've already been on to that. But of course, all this isn't done by the County Council, it's done by highways. And they had, I was assured that they had their ecological people in, and they did an assessment, and they had all the right people in there to go ahead and do what they did. So I am absolutely very delighted that this has come on to this agenda, because it was a worry to me as well. Thank you.
So were you referring to the Highways Agency?
It's the Highways Agency who give the all clear to cut the trees, and they make sure that everything like the birds nesting, it's all in their remit and not the County Council. That's what I've been told by a county officer anyway.
So we have three issues: the change of the design, the wildlife issues, and the cost. It seems clear that the cost question is very much a local one for us, and probably the change of design. If there's been a change of cabinet member, it may be unfair, but can I suggest that we write to Councillor Raphael asking for answers on those 2 points, the change in design and the costs.
If I might say so, Chair.
Councillor Keating.
If I might say so, Chair. That's what the panel asked for, right? And so I mean, instead of saying we didn't say what particular individual, we say the portfolio holder. So if the portfolio holder is now correctly identified, then we just send it to that portfolio holder.
Fine, but I was going to go on to say that if we're assured that the Highways Agency are responsible, then we should take an additional initiative and ask for the Highways Agency to report to us on the issues of wildlife protection in the works.
I would have no hesitation in accepting that, Chair. shall we ask the same questions of the highways agency as well? Yeah.
Yes, I think there's a principle to be established here about the ability of this council to scrutinise. Yeah. So is that agreed? We'll endorse the recommendation and introduce the highways agency as well.
And as I said earlier, the broadband issues are we're reliant on the portfolio holder to respond to a specific range of issues, and we'll come back to it in September as a performance panel. So the only thing outstanding for this particular committee is whether or not to put on the scrutiny agenda the issue of waste recycling. That's the only issue. And I'm suggesting, as chair of the performance panel, we should do so. Thank you.
Is that agreed? So the next time we do a review of our, I think that will be one of the candidates. Councillor Musson.
It's on the recycling chair. I'd like to ask Councillor Keating, because there's two there that are in orange, and in the notes we've only got household waste recycling, and I'm wondering if we shouldn't include the other one, because perhaps the contamination rate may have a factor on the other one. So I'm asking, are we only looking at one, or are we going to look at both? And the other one, the other point is K8, reduction of crime in the borough, which hasn't been picked up. I'd just like to flag to the committee, if I may, a little doubt I've got in my mind about the statistics on that, and I'm wondering if perhaps we shouldn't ask for some indication to perhaps prove whether my theory may be unfounded. And my theory is that the reduction of crime is because the failure of the public to report. So we're not actually seeing a reduction, we're seeing a failure to report. So I'm wondering if that statistic is not actually flawed.
Do you want to respond to that, Sean?
There's absolutely no doubt that the issue of contamination will be a component part of the range of issues associated with household waste recycling, and it will be a component part. The reason it wasn't specifically identified was if you're dealing with recycling of household waste, then you have to deal with a range of issues. And so I would have no hesitation in saying you're right, and it will be dealt with under the scrutiny thereof, in my view. The issue of reduction to crime or whatever, there's no doubt people will have views about, is it under recording, under reporting, misreporting. There's a whole range of issues that associated with that one point you've just made. However, if you look from my perspective, chair of a performance panel, there is no problem with performance here. We're doing well. The only question you would raise is, are we doing as well as we seem to be? So at the moment, what I'm saying is we're doing well enough to not to need to worry about it immediately, if you know what I mean. Thank you.
If I may, Chair, just add one of the points that I get. Perhaps I wouldn't have thought Tadley was the only one affected, but I heard that we were going to close the police station in Tadley, and so I immediately asked the question, oh, okay, then do you think it would be possible for us to use the building and the land around the building for parking, because we're desperately short of parking in an area? I was then told very quickly by the county, oh, actually, we're not closing the police station, we're closing the desk where public can go to actually talk to the police. The police are still going to occupy the building, so you can't use the building, you can't use the car park, you just can't talk to them. So that meant to me that the ability of the residents to go along and have a discussion with the police, yes, I know we've got a phone number and people can phone that, but some people still like to go along and report things and discuss and have a dialogue with the police. So if you take that away, then perhaps there's less opportunity and people start to shrug the shoulders and say, why should I bother? And I have had, to be fair though, I have reported this to the officers. The officers have come to Tadley and engage with residents because Chief Constable has taken it seriously. So I can't say they're not doing anything about it, but I do believe, based on that feedback, that there is an element of, why should I bother? As one resident said to me, the police will just come along, drive down the road, drive back again, and that'll be it. They won't even get out of the car. If the public feel like that, I think perhaps we will see a reduction in reporting. And if that's picked up as a reduction in crime, it's sad. That's what I'm making the point about.
Councillor James.
My understanding that crime, I know it's off the agenda if you like, but the crime statistics are gathered by an amalgamation of two different sets of figures. There's the recorded crime, which the police obviously collect and collate, and also there's public perception of crime. And the two figures are mixed together to come out with the actual crime rate that you see in the media. Now, the same method has been used for many, many years for all the different changes in legislation and everything else and the way the police work, and the crime is showing it's down. And so that's using an amalgamate. It's not just what's reported to police, because, like you say, that can vary. It's also the public perception. Both individual measures show crime is down. The public perception is that crime's down. The police say crime is down. The two together, unsurprisingly, come out with crime is down. Whether it's down as much, we can argue about. But like Councillor Keating says, on the measure, the established measure, it's a bit like unemployment figures. It's not based on actually how many people are unemployed. It's a little sort of basket. It's a little tool they run, a little sort of formula based on some survey. I was quite surprised when I found this out. But they've used the same survey for years to pump out the same figure. The figure could be horrendously wrong, but it's wrong in the same way it's been wrong for years. So the comparison is valid.
Any other comments at all on the performance monitoring? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. It wouldn't go without suggesting that the indicators relating to homelessness and affordable housing are incredibly concerning, and that I know we've put it on our work programme to pick up the issues of affordable housing. I think that just reinforces the point. And it is worth noting, and this should be fed back to Cabinet, I think, that in terms of the actual delivery, we're relying on one major site next year, which is in my ward, Fremantle, Tamper and Westray, to deliver what effectively will be 1 year's fairly large hit of affordable housing, because it's a 100% affordable housing site. And we shouldn't lose sight of that fact. It isn't in here in the way that it's written, but I just want to make the point that the only reason we're going to see a significant increase in the figure next year is because that single site is delivering 100% affordable housing. And that's quite something for any of the sites in this borough, let alone anywhere else. So we shouldn't lose sight of that. And on the homelessness point, can I just pick up the issue that we should also differentiate and make a point of differentiating, and then thank you to the officers for doing this, excluding flooding? Because even without the flooding issues included in the homelessness figures, they are still very disturbing. And again, we should make note of that and feed that back to the Cabinet, I think. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Keating, would you like to move on to the revenue and capital outturn?
I beg your pardon, Chair. I thought I'd made the point. The only issue that I was raising as substantive matters for this committee tonight were the three that I had identified as asterisks. The others are already in your document. You will have read the papers. There are issues in lots of these things, but they are not necessarily sufficiently serious to be requiring specific scrutiny.
Thank you. I wanted that on the record.
Thank you. I move my report on that basis, Chair.
So anybody else wish to raise anything explicitly on the revenue and capital outturn? Councillor Harvey.
I'm just searching for it because I did it at Cabinet. Forgive me, Chair. On the homelessness one, on Appendix 2, we have Housing and Regeneration Portfolio has an 81,000 favourable variance. I am very concerned to see that the homelessness tag there has got a 52,300 favourable variance. How in the world are we making a favourable variance on homelessness in terms of our spend, considering the indicator, the performance indicator? You know, we should highlight that, because for me, that's a massive issue. It does say there, this is a result of improved measures in recharging customers for payments on there. But, well, that's all well and good, but we've still got a massive issue with homelessness. So I can't correlate the two, and we need to flag that up, I think, as something that is important.
Thank you. We'll ask for that to be amplified for us for the next performance panel and subsequently the scrutiny committee. Now we have to review our work programme. In fact, it's to confirm the work programme because we only confirmed as far as today at the last meeting. And what you have attached to the very back of the agenda is coming out of our various discussions, my proposal for what the programme should now be, as amended by anything we've decided this evening. Councillor Harvey.
And if I can throw in for good measure what I said at the last meeting, and you told and invited me to come back at this one, I'd like to suggest that we include in the work programme a scrutiny of the issues relating to flooding in the borough in 2014. And by that I mean the awareness of, the response to, the follow-up to and residents' concerns with recommendations for action thereof.
Is that agreed? Do you have a proposal for a specific timetable for that?
I would take guidance from the officers as to how best to fit it into the timetable, really, considering the county report has just been published. Our officers have done an internal review that is part of something I think that needs to be. At this stage, to my understanding, there has been absolutely no public scrutiny, review or engagement on this issue with the residents affected in any of the wards by flooding. And I know my two colleagues in Buckskin have raised this and are working on this with residents. You yourself, Chair, might be able to speak for your end of the borough, but we've also got Councillor Raffel's ward that was affected. So there's, to my knowledge, there has been no public involvement in any review of the flooding issues. It's all been done behind closed doors, and that is a concern, hence be bringing it to you. So timetabling.
Well, I think we'll take the urgency in your tone and we'll talk to the appropriate officers to see where we can fit it in the programme. Anybody else want to comment? Can we adopt this as our current forward work programme and we have nothing for January next year? Councillor Potter.
Joe, forgive me, sorry, I wanted...
Scratching your head.
Well, no, well, that as well, but just your indulgence, I just wanted to raise an additional matter with you. You'd give me an opportunity in just a second, but have you finished that or not?
Sorry, an additional matter on the work programme?
No, it's a matter that relates to our meeting tomorrow evening, Chair. Can I do that at some stage?
Yes, I mean, as far as the work programme is concerned, I think it's agreed that we'll sort out with the officers a date. The next meeting is in September, and I think that would be ideal if we can meet that target for the homelessness.
That 23rd of September is the date, obviously, you're going to change.
I've just been reminded, because the Cabinet member for commissioning, among other things, isn't available on the 23rd of September, we're changing that date to the 9th of September. Councillor Harvey?
Just a thought then, Chair. It's up to members, I think, to think this through with officers. But if we've got a meeting on the 9th of September and then we are not meeting until the 4th of November, is it beyond the wit of us to fit something in between then? There's a 2-month gap to do something on the flooding.
Well, if you remember, I was concerned we had a 4-month gap. I warned I was proposing we have a reserve meeting every month, but that wasn't welcomed by the officers. Leave it that we're going to fit in a report on the flooding, and we'll tell you the day before if we're going to have a special meeting on it, as is our wont with this committee. Councillor Potter, then.
Chairman, presumably you'll be chairing the call-in that we're going to attend tomorrow evening. Can I just be reassured that the normal arrangements, inverted commas, in respect of speaking times and order of speakers, because we will have public speakers tomorrow and other visiting councillors, will be as we normally understand them, and we're not going to be faced with arbitrary changes by you on the evening. It caught a lot of people by surprise when we met with Stagecoach. I found it unacceptable, and I just want to be reassured that we'll be back to normal tomorrow evening. You don't have any plans in mind for tomorrow evening?
I do have plans in mind for tomorrow evening. I should remind you that the other meeting was dealt with at short notice, and I'm not sure about normal arrangements. I refer to the Constitution. But if you like, I can tell you the order that we are proposing, because I consulted the Vice Chairman and some officers before this meeting. Except that I've lost them. I didn't write them in the pad. Well, I'm sorry, I wasn't prepared for this, and I'm obviously very unprepared for it. The intention with regard to public speaking is that the public speaking will come after the people who've requisitioned the call-in spoken, and after the speakers who've asked to speak, or in fact as a part of, from the football club, because it was felt by my advisors that the football club's presentation would be something that the members of the public needed to hear before they could finalise the comments they want to make. And there will be 2 minutes for each public speaker. Councillor Keating, who will be the Vice Chairman tomorrow evening.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to reassure people that that in our discussions we did change the priority order in terms of public speaking, and that we would ensure that they didn't have to wait for visiting councillors and other councillors to talk, that they would be given priority. But in a call-in meeting, you start off with the people who've called it in, then you ask the primary proposal, which is in this case the football people, to then go after the call-in people, and thereafter you have public speaking, then you have visiting members, and then you have the general arrangement of the committee discussing matters, with of course the portfolio holder coming in soon thereafter. Thank you.
To James.
I just want to check now, out of fairness to the officers, 'cause it may be they don't have to answer it now, and it may not matter at all. It doesn't actually bother me too much. But we're calling in something that has flowed out of a decision made by Cabinet in 2012. Councillor Still and Councillor Golding were both on that Cabinet in 2012 making the decision. They both are now members of Scrutiny. I don't know whether it's a problem or not, but if I raise it now, we've at least got 24 hours to work it out.
Councillor Golding is a reserve member of Scrutiny, and I don't think he intends to be here then. We could ask the officers' opinion on that. That there is a rule that no member can scrutinise a decision in which they took part. But in fact, the decision we're scrutinising, I believe, is one that's been made more recently by Councillor Sanders.
Well, I can answer that. I gave my apologies last week when we got the date through. It was it's one I can't attend anyway, and I had actually forgotten about that, my decision. So you're absolutely right to raise it. Thank you, because I could have been sat here and not declared an interest or something.
Subjects are, because it may or may not be an issue, because the decision that was made in 2012 was to enter into negotiations with. The decision made by Cabinet last month was to say we have now had those negotiations with. So the decision can only be made because the decision previously made in 2012. So it's a hinge that may or may not be a problem.
There are signals from the public seats saying it's not going to be an issue, but I don't know whether we can take account of those. Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Chair. The other issue that we discussed briefly at the pre-meeting was to invite those people who signed the call-in to give us a clues to how many of you are going to speak and how much time do you think you will need.
Yes, will there be a lead speaker, as the previous procedure required? So, no, we weren't going to ask you about it at this meeting, but just to let us prepare for tomorrow's meeting. Is everybody satisfied that we've dealt with this and we can... Councillor Faulkner?
Yeah, if I may, as I'm used to new to all of this, at the end of tomorrow evening, what will we have, or what will we hope to achieve? Will it be a yes, no, or will it be a set of recommendations that we then feed back to Cabinet? Right, thank you.
Yes, I've advised that we're supposed to be flexible, so it could be that the actual terms of the call-in will vary as the meeting progresses. I have to say, as chairman, I'm a bit nervous about that, but I'm closing this meeting now.
For the record, Chair, may I ask, as I will do now at every single meeting, just to be absolutely clear for the record, I take it you received no communication and no apologies from Councillor Ellery?
I have received no communication, and the officers have not notified me of any communication, but there's a lot of 6 months left yet.
Chairman, I understand it's within your gift to allow cameras to be used in this room. So if we were to put Mr. Ellery's card in a holder by an empty chair and take a picture, would you consent to that?
No.
Git.